The Book of the Dead is an ancient Egyptian funeral literature used from the beginning of the New Kingdom, which is about 1550 BCE to around 50 BCE. It was written on papyrus. The text's originally Egyptian name, Ra, Nu, Put, Hua, translates to the Book of Coming Forth by Day of Book, of emerging forth into the light. Thus, the loose collection of texts is best described as a book. The Book of the Dead, which was kept in the deceased coffin or burial chamber, was part of a long history of funerary literature that included the older pyramid text and the coffin text, painted on items rather than written on papyrus. Now, some of these spells in the book were adapted from previous texts and date back to the 3rd millennium BCE. Later, in Egyptian, other spells were written. These texts were actual. However, the Golden Book of Amun-Ra is not. Today, we're taking a look at the Black Book of the Dead. Hi, I'm Rob, and this is A Constantly Racing Mind. The Black Book of the Dead was an ancient Egyptian book made of pure obsidian, known colloquially as the Black Book. Now, the Black Book of the Dead contained ancient spells and incantations that could resurrect the dead and summon the warriors of the book, which are called ghost warriors. King Ramses has guarded the Black Book of the Dead in his palace's treasure chamber in the late 3000s BCE to keep it secure from theft. Likewise, the ancient Egyptians stored the book inside the statue of Anubis at Amun-Ra, which was deemed forbidden to use, to keep it safe from unworthy mankind 2,000 years later. Now, the Black Book of the Dead's spells and incantations were rendered worthless in the late 3000s unless the Eye of the Gods medallion was worn while reading it. Now, a few years later, the Black Book of the Dead was redesigned so that only those with a key could access it. The Black Book included a little puzzle box with a device that, when unlocked, served as the Black Book's key. So, if you like sci-fi, horror, action-adventure, prop culture, and all things geek, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to be aware of all my new videos coming up. Talus, a merciless warrior and brother of Horus, Egypt's most powerful god, Pharaoh, leads a legion of warriors to the Far East searching for the Black Book of the Dead in the late 3000s. Now, Talus would utilize the Black Book to both defeat his brother Horus and conquer empires. Talus marched to King Ramessen's palace, which served as the keeper of the renowned Black Book of the Dead. Talus dispatched his army to attack Ramessen's palace to seize the Black Book of the Dead and raise the warriors of the dead. Ramessen concealed the book in the treasure chamber, but Talus discovered it. Before Talus opens it, he must first defeat Ramessen. Talus pulls out the medallion that he stole from Ramessen's daughter, Princess Silda, and it informs him that the text would be useless without the Eye of the Gods medallion. Talus summons the warriors of the book with the Black Book of the Dead and the medallion that night. Zulu Kondo, a lion spirit from the land of the flaming sky, is the first warrior to rise. Agromael, a noble destroyer, is the next warrior to rise. Sukai, a shadow warrior from the land of the rising sun, is the last warrior to rise. Now, Talus orders Zulu Kondo and Sukai to kill Cobra, which is Princess Silda, while Agromael guards Talus. However, when Zulu Kondo and Tusaki arrive in Silda's village, Silda informs Matthias, who's the Scorpion King, which we've talked about before, that Talus has raised the ghost warriors, and anyone who reads from the Black Book of the Dead awakens the warriors from the underworld. Talus then tells Sukai that to keep the Black Book safe. Talus returns the Black Book to the treasure chamber under lock and key, and Agromael is tasked with guarding the treasure chamber's exterior entrance. Sukai arrives. Matthias holds the medallion and orders Sukai to obey him. Still, Silda informs him that once a person commands the warriors, they cannot be controlled unless they recite the incantation to swap their allegiance. Now, the medallion is taken by Talus, who orders Sukai to finish Matthias and Silda. Then, because Ramessan lacks the strength to complete the incantation, Matthias grabs the book and the medallion and completes the reading, and the ghost warriors switch their allegiance to Matthias. After that, Ramusin, the fabled Black Book of the Dead's guardian, dies. Matthias is then crowned king of Ramus's kingdom, with Silda as his queen. Happy ending. The book was then returned to the treasure chamber, which will remain safe for the next 1,000 years. In 1290 BCE, Imhotep, the treacherous high priest of Osiris, stole the Black Book of the Dead from its resting place in the treasure room and took it to Amun-Ra. His plan was to resurrect his deceased lover Anck-su-namun after using an enchantment spell to make the Black Book of the Dead, and its magic spells work even without the Eye of the Gods medallion. However, before performing the ceremony that would bring his sweetheart back, he was apprehended by the Magi, who subsequently sentenced the high priest and his students to be mummified alive. Thus, Imhotep was sentenced to the most severe of all ancient curses, that dreaded Hum-Dai, which was so potent that it had never been carried out before. The Black Book of the Dead was returned to its rightful place beneath the statue of Anubis, along with 5 canopic jars containing Anck-su-namun's remains, all of which were placed inside a wooden chest bearing a curse that would kill anyone who would open it. Now, if Imhotep arose, he would be obliged by holy law to kill those who committed the crime by draining their organs and fluids. In doing so, Imhotep would be reverted to his human form and granted invincibility. 3,000 years after the last use of the Black Book of the Dead, a group of treasure hunters and an Egyptologist discovered the city of Amun-Ra and began probing the remains for valuables. Now, the wooden box containing the Black Book and the 5 sacred canopic jars had been found by a gang of treasure hunters who had staked out the base of the statue of Anubis as their excavation site. Now, when 3 treasure hunters decided to pry open the box, their Egyptologist, Alan Chamberlain, warned them all against doing so since the chest was cursed. Now, regardless of any curse placed on it, the chest had been wrenched open, and the Black Book of the Dead had been revealed. At the sight of the Black Book, Chamberlain stood in reverent awe, while his 3 colleagues, treasure hunters, mocked it as worthless. Chamberlain had also acquired a canopic jar after Henderson, one of the 3 treasure hunters, unintentionally banged his foot against the chest, uncovering a secret compartment in the side where the 5 canopic jars containing Anck-su-namun's were housed. Each of the men stole a jar for himself, leaving the 5th canopic jar with the lion's head broken behind. Another set of treasure hunters had discovered a mummy bound by the Hum-Dai curse in the chamber above. Now, Dr. Chamberlain tried in vain to open the Black Book of the Dead with his hands that night and was approached by Evelyn Carnahan, another scholar searching for Amun-Ra's treasure, who informed the Egyptologist that he needed a key to open the Black Book. Now, Chamberlain pondered this notion before falling asleep with the Black Book clutched in his hands, though Rick O'Connell, who had escorted Evelyn and her brother, Jonathan Carnahan, to Amun-Ra, had characterized Evelyn's act as theft. Evelyn slipped into the sleeping Dr. Chamberlain's tent. She removed the Black Book from his clutches, taking care not to wake the professor. Now, on the other hand, Evelyn claimed it was merely a harmless act of reading from a book. Evelyn then used the key to open the Black Book, causing a strong blast of wind to blow around the treasure hunters' camp, and continued to read the words inside. Evelyn had no idea at the time, but the incantation that she was reading were causing the mummies she, Rick, and Jonathan had discovered to resurrect. In the chamber below, the mummy awoke, shrieking, and Dr. Chamberlain awoke as well, shouting at Evelyn not to read from the Black Book. Thus, the Black Book of the Dead was never found and buried underwater in a coffin for many years. The curses that followed, however, had already begun to take effect. A large swarm of locusts descended upon the campsite, forcing all those who could run to flee into the catacombs, except for several native diggers and Dr. Chamberlain, who remained in the campsite, covered in locusts, clutching the Black Book and wondering what they had done. When the Magi returned to the campground, they kidnapped Dr. Chamberlain and took the Black Book of the Dead. The expeditionary was informed by Ardith Bey, the Magi leader, that they had unleashed an ancient evil and should all flee the city. Now, when Dr. Chamberlain was told to go, he clutched the Book of the Dead tightly and did not let go. Dr. Chamberlain rushed through the streets of Cairo 2 days later, clutching the black book in his canopic jar. Unbeknownst to him, he was being pursued by the mummy who had previously been resurrected by the black book, Imhotep. The mummy is hunting him down to obtain the black book and the canopic jars and suck the life out of him. Later, he discovered Dr. Chamberlain and proceeded to suck the man dry of his organs and his fluids, killing him and taking the black book and the canopic jar from Dr. Chamberlain's withered hands. Imhotep proceeded to produce a large cloud of flies that swarmed through the streets of Cairo and overwhelmed the populace now that he had the black book. Now finally, the mummy quietly went away with another canopic jar and the black book of the dead in town, while the townsfolk hurriedly brushed away the flies. Imhotep wanted to use the black book of the dead to perform the ceremony to bring his sweetheart back to life. Therefore, it was eventually returned to Amun-Ra. Imhotep entered the ritual chamber with Evelyn tethered to the sacrificial altar, summoning his mummified priests to slay O'Connell, Jonathan, and Ardith Bey, and partake in the singing of verses. 7 years after the Black Book's previous use, cultists discovered the Black Book of the Dead, as well as the Golden Book of Amun-Ra, which they guarded closely. The incantation of the Black Book of the Dead were afterward utilized in London by cultists led by British Museum curator Baltus Hafiz to resuscitate the mummy Imhotep. Now, the cultists believed that by raising the high priest and having him fight the fabled Scorpion King, they could acquire control of the Scorpion King's army, the army of Anubis. Now, the cultists took the Black Book of the Dead with them on their voyage to Karnak, where they paused for the night to set up camp after O'Connell and Evelyn's son, Alex O'Connell, who had been kidnapped by the cultists, tried to flee. When Imhotep used his powers to entice the cultist Mila Nais into reliving her previous life as Anck-su-namun, she acted out the events of the last night of her life, completing her activities with a stab to the stomach, killing herself. The Black Book of the Dead was once again employed. Imhotep resurrected Anck-su-namun by using the Black Book of the Dead to summon her soul from the underworld. Now the cultists took the Black Book of the Dead to Am-Sher, where it was removed by Shafek to keep it safe, and the Black Book finally wound up in the hands of Anck-su-namun, who brandished it in front of the skeptical Alex O'Connell. And after Anck-su-namun murdered the boy's mother, Imhotep took the Black Book of the Dead inside the pyramid of Am-Sher and gave it to Anck-su-namun, from whom Alex stole it to resuscitate his mother. Now, after the Scorpion King was defeated and the pyramid was returned to the underworld, the Book of the Dead, kept within the pyramid, was also returned to the underworld. To source a supplier for this ancient tome was actually not that hard. And fortunately, I was able to turn to, well, you know where. That's right, Etsy. I also turned to my go-to mummy store on that platform, 3D to Life. Now, previously I did a presentation on the Scorpion King's bracelet featuring a 3D design and workable scorpion bracelet, and I'll leave a link in the description of that video. Now, the box came kind of beat up, which led me to be quite a bit concerned. However, as you can see, this is actually very well wrapped. Now, with this sitting outside my door for about 5 hours, I got home and brought it in right away. Now, I don't open all my packages right away, as I want to do a proper opening on screen and show off the prop's full glory. As you can see, this quote-unquote book was sheltered in a bubble wrap and packaged in paper. So this item comes from Staffordshire, England, and it took a bit to get here, and it came in the heat of the summer as it was getting into full swing. Now, I live in the United States Southwest, which is an issue when it comes to the assembly of this prop, and I'll talk about that more in a few seconds. And of course, to open the book, you'll need a key. Now, this is a 3D printed item, and it's printed in black and gold PLA plastic. The detail is pretty good. However, I'm not absolutely sure about the color of the interior of the quote-unquote pages. As in this image over here, the pages seem to be made of gold. Now, as I began to open the book the first time, I encountered a few pages starting to come off its hinges. So I was forced to re-glue the prop back together. Very disappointing. Now, I tried to super glue it back, thinking that would be a better bonding agent. However, I ended up hot gluing it back together after all. My house is temperature controlled, so I'm not worried about the glue coming undone again. Now, 3D Delight does have videos on how to assemble this prop if you buy it as a kit, which I use to help repair the book. What I do like about this prop is all the hieroglyphic detail on the pages and the scorpion symbols on several of the main pages, and of course, the sacred dung beetle, which plays an essential part of the ancient Egyptians' religious beliefs in death and rebirth. Overall, I would have hoped for something that held together better in travel. Still, the hot gluing process wasn't all that bad, and maybe a coat of gold paint and some acrylic metal coat will really make this shine as a centerpiece to the Egyptian section of my crazy museum here at home. So what did you think of The Mummy? Is that a film that you watch frequently? Whenever it shows up on TV, do you just decide to watch it again? Let me know in the comments below. Tell me what you think of this prop, and like and subscribe and ring the bell to get notified and watch these videos for more mummy and film prop fun. So take care.